I haven't played the board game Pandemic since January 2020, even though it's one of my favorite games. Every time I've reached into the board game cupboard since COVID started, I just haven't been able to pull it out because I don't want to trivialize what's going on in the world by making a game out of it. But now that I've had a chance to step back and think about the game and this global tragedy more, I've begun to wonder if it can teach us about how the world should think about pandemic responses. Is it possible that this game has some of the answers to crisis response that we've needed all along? Thanks for joining us to answer this question here on Legendary Tactics. This video is a little different from our usual focus on the lighter side of gaming and strategy. We're going to look at 10 lessons that we can learn about dealing with the real-world pandemic from the board game Pandemic. And to be clear, I don't believe that COVID is a game, nor should it be treated lightly. That's not my intention. Anyone who's experienced COVID either directly or indirectly knows how serious it is. It's completely reshaped our world and our way of thinking about the world. If you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to use real-world data to model, using the Pandemic board, what our world looks like today in terms of COVID distribution across the globe in order to offer one final lesson about our global response. Just in case you haven't played this game before, it's got a really unique game mechanic that simulates 4 different virulent diseases breaking out across the globe. The players are disease-fighting experts with special skills needed to treat hotspots, research the cure, and eradicate the plague. It's a transnational cooperative board game to beat the pandemic. This brings us to lesson number 1. What's the first conversation that happens in this board game? Players infect the map. There are sometimes hot zones or problem areas that they notice, so they begin their planning. They decide where they need to go first. They get ahead of problems before they get out of control. And they talk not just about the immediate need to stop the spread, but also about long-term plans to come up with a cure. So planning a strategy is pivotal. They assign roles to each player and let specialists handle the various facets of the game. They do this thinking not about individual territories, but by thinking about the whole map. In the real world, thinking in terms of the well-being of the planet is extremely difficult when each country has its own perceptions about, beliefs surrounding, and ways of dealing with the virus. There have been attempts to create transnational approaches to crisis management, but the results have largely been unsuccessful. Lesson number 2. Cooperation. By definition, a pandemic is an epidemic that spreads over multiple countries or continents. It knows no borders and indiscriminately infects people regardless of nationality. When COVID began, there was a sense that this was a disease that only affected China. Soon we started hearing about Italy. People clung to the belief that it couldn't happen here simply because it never had done so in our lifetime. But then it did. The mechanic that serves as the foundation of the board game is also that which we needed most in the early stages of transmission: cooperation. This meant sharing information, sharing prevention methods, sharing research, and really truly identifying this as a major crisis. Pointing fingers at your fellow players isn't productive in the game, and neither is it in reality. Lesson number 3. Specialists and trust. The base game features a dispatcher who coordinates the team's efforts, a medic who can target problem cities, a scientist who can accelerate the process of finding the cure, the researcher who shares knowledge more readily between players, the operations expert who can mobilize quickly or build research stations. Rather like the various pharmaceutical firms producing vaccines, that is. Our third lesson is that in any effort to control a virus, we need to rely on specialists, and we need to coordinate our efforts based on who has the skills needed at different times. If I'm playing as a dispatcher, I can't slow the virus down quickly by myself, but I need to trust that if I can get my medic into place, they can. We can't do it all, and this game teaches us that we need to trust our specialists. Lesson number 4. Proactive versus reactive. They say the biggest difference between healthcare professionals and politicians is that the former are proactive and the latter are reactive. Healthcare professionals foresee what's coming and they work to avoid the consequences by treating the symptoms early. Politicians, on the other hand, often wait for a crisis to emerge and then they play whack-a-mole trying to put those fires out. So the tension is very real between the decision makers and the health experts. In Pandemic, being proactive is the #1 strategy you need to win this game. Just because an area hasn't surged yet doesn't mean that it won't surge in the near future. As healthcare professionals would use models, players can use their knowledge of the infection deck to preemptively respond to problem areas, even before they emerge. By contrast, the reactive response would be to wait to see where the problem emerges and respond only when the cubes become visible on the board. In both the game and the real world, being proactive is critical. To continue this thought, our fifth lesson is one about helping each other. Some areas in the world have been much harder hit than others. This could be related to population density or how those nations have responded to the crisis. But no matter what the reason, when somebody needs help, we need to give it. If the medic is overwhelmed in the game, 2 or even 3 players will rush to help out. Likewise, when countries are in need of oxygen or medical resources, partners around the world send help. This is what makes us human, the ability to transcend borders and to help those in the most need. Lesson number 6. The strains. I always thought that it was a little bit odd that the game had 4 different colors that players needed to eradicate, but now I understand that each of the colors represents a different strain of the disease. This is one area where the board game doesn't simulate reality, but it does get the general idea right. In the game, all of the variants can be treated in exactly the same way. What we know in reality is that different strains of the disease can affect different age groups, and some are more contagious and also some are more deadly. One problem that some governments have struggled with is realizing that the strains are different and that they need to be handled differently. The first wave was mostly benign in young people, but as the new variants have spread, younger and younger people have been infected and adversely affected. So what the game does get right is that it's not one color of cube across the whole board, it's 4 different colors, and they need to be treated that way. Lesson number 7. I'm going to stray from Pandemic just a little bit here, but this comparison I think is really important. Some of you may have played another game that's similar to Pandemic. It's almost Pandemic in reverse. It's called Plague Inc. The goal is the opposite. It's to infect the world. I played it a few times, but I never really felt good about the concept of trying to infect the globe, and that's made even worse now. But it contained one lesson that I think is really important that we don't get from Pandemic. It seemed that one nation that always survived in Plague Inc. was Madagascar, at least in my games it did, because as soon as the disease started to spread, they shut down air and sea travel immediately. Because of their isolation, this was effective. Parallel to this in the real world, we have countries like New Zealand, a geographically isolated nation, who reacted quickly and decisively with a stay-at-home order and some of the strictest border control measures globally, and like Madagascar in the game, their methods have been some of the most effective. Lesson number 8. Back to Pandemic, and this is about limited actions. The core rule of the game is that each player gets only 4 actions, with the exception of the generalist, who actually gets 5. In our world, we too are limited by time, energy, money, and geopolitical considerations. So what can you do when the map starts to get out of control, and you still only have 4 actions? Throughout the game, the relative worth of the specialist changes. Some roles are better at dealing with immediate concerns, like the medic. Others, like the operations specialist, are better at building infrastructure that makes movement and response time much more efficient. So even though you still have the same number of actions in the late game, it's important that you move forward right from the outset, building necessary infrastructure so that you're not constantly putting out fires. There's only so much we can do with our resources in the real world, but it's important that we find ways to make our actions accomplish more as the game progresses. Lesson number 9, Legacy. After the successful release of the original Pandemic, a new version called Pandemic Legacy was released in 2015. In case you're not familiar with them, legacy games are ones where the board evolves. Cards are permanently destroyed and ripped up, boxes with treasure are opened, the maps are altered and written on with permanent ink, and the rules change organically as the game proceeds. This version of the game reminds us that our world has changed. We aren't the same as we were at the start of 2020. Some people have changed the way they think about the world, and many others are in a much worse situation now. It's been paradigm altering. The world we live in has also changed fundamentally. The way we interact, the way we communicate, and the way we exist in the world is radically changed. Just as it's hard for a board gamer to vandalize the board game they just bought, it's also hard for us to adjust to the new reality of the world and to accept that it has changed. But we must move on, and we must adjust to the new normal. Lesson number 10, Modeling. At the start of the video, I told you that I would model using this board game what our current infection rate looks like globally. I think this can help us see more universally what areas need the most attention in the world and where we need to focus our collective efforts. Board games have been a major source of entertainment and distraction during COVID, and though I still haven't been able to play this game, I do appreciate how it can serve to model and simulate real-world events and what it can teach us about pandemic response. If you've played the game, you know that it ends if the virus gets out of control, or if it's cured. Unlike most games in Pandemic, it's not the individual, but rather the collective effort that gets rewarded. Either we all win, or we all lose. So let's continue working cooperatively, each with our own specialty, to solve this global problem. Thanks so much for your time.